What's going on, everybody? Sai from Forge Physio. Today we're gonna go over the Kickstand RDL on the wall. So we got kettlebell and a barbell set up here. You can do this with a dumbbell if you want. You can do a body weight too. This is actually a really challenging movement if you get all the setup positions right. And bear with me a little bit because it is a confusing setup position. And I get this a lot from our clientele base that, man, this is confusing. There's so many steps. Is it necessary? In our opinion, yes, is when you get the right position, we're really able to load into the foot and into the hip joint to really get the hip and the hamstring muscles to fire. So when you get set up, you wanna go on the wall, and I've seen this coached a little bit differently than how we coach it, but a lot of people will coach to where when your back foot's on the wall, you want your knees to be even. We like to coach it to where when your back foot's on the wall, your forward foot is 3 to 5 or so inches in front of the opposite foot. Helps people feel more stable. Then you want your feet to be hip width apart. And then the key, in my opinion, is really pushing your feet in opposite directions. So I'm pushing my right foot into the wall and my left foot into the ground, and I'm trying to keep my feet hip width apart so that I'm stable. Now, the most common mistake is if we're just doing a normal RDL, I see is people will shift their weight to the outside of their foot on the forward leg, and it doesn't really get them internal rotation into that hip joint of the leg that's working. So I want you to think about pushing your heel and your arch down into the ground, but not so much that the outside of my left foot were to come off the ground. So I'm keeping my foot flat, but I'm giving myself just a little bit more of a cue of pushing that arch into the ground. And then I'm gonna take this knee and I'm gonna drop it toward the ground. So now I'm really closing off into this left hip, and I can already feel my hip working just holding this position. Now from there, if I think about pushing my feet in opposite directions, and then I go through and do a hinging motion, reaching across my body with my right arm, and then come back up and keep all that tension, my left hip is really getting worked with just body weight. If I want to make that harder, I can grab a kettlebell, and I can do it with a kettlebell reaching across my body. Same exact setup position, drop that knee, grab my weight, I can reach across, stand up, drive my feet through the wall, and then every rep, I want to think about my right knee dropping toward the floor before I start, reaching across my body, coming back up. Okay, and then if you want it to be extremely challenging, we can play around with physics a little bit and do this with a bar. So we typically don't do a lot of like offset style loading, but if I take this bar and I put more of the bar to my right, that's gonna pull me into internal rotation. So I'm gonna have to fight with my external rotators to be able to stabilize that. And for some people that can't feel their glute and their hamstrings when they're training them, this is a really simple way to get someone to feel it. So if you go to the wall, exact same setup position, I'm keeping my knee at about 90 or less, pushing my feet into the wall, pushing my arch in the ground. So if I just grab this bar and I hold it in the middle, I can feel my hip working. If I scoot it to the outside, still feel my hip working. It's not as challenging. But if I scoot it the opposite way, you can see how hard that is for me just to hold that position like so. My glute really starts to fire. So one way you can play around with the setup is moving the bar back and forth, just like I did there, or moving the bar more to your right if you're working the left leg, and more to the left if you're working the right leg, to really get that hip to fire a lot. Again, this is the drill that we use to teach you how to build pressure through the floor, get the calf, the hamstring, and the hip to all work together at the same time.